Ready? All right, this is a meeting of the Personnel Committee. It's Tuesday, May 3rd at 9 a.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The first agenda item is to approve the previous meeting minutes of March 8th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second? Second. Any comment? All those in favor? Aye.
I'll abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
Motion passes. Citizens' comments. I think we have two, right? All right. Intent. All right.
Well, thank you, Paul. I bring tidings of joy. No heavy lifting here, Jan. I wanted to take the opportunity on behalf of the Exchange Club. My name is Ted Kinghorn, for the record, that the Exchange Club has a youth scholarship program. And I wanted to make sure that all of the city staff were aware of the opportunity that they could have dependents apply for the scholarship and use this opportunity to promote it to the general community, our neighbors and friends. Give you an example, this past month, the Exchange Club gave their awards. They give approximately 8 awards a year, totaling somewhere from $20,000 to $25,000. I think Scott was at the meeting and one of the recipients spoke. The recipients and their families typically come to an evening event, and it was very moving. But I wanted to make sure that the staff was aware that their children could apply for the grant. And it's an annual event. You can get the information on IOP Exchange Club website. Secondly, on your agenda is a new award that I understand the city is considering. And I wanted to bring to your attention a gentleman who happens to be a member of the Exchange Club, but I'm going to run down a list of the groups that he either volunteers with, he and his wife support. He has shown great leadership. He's done this for a number of years. I only probably know a percentage of the activities he's engaged in, but he is very generous with his time and talent. The list includes the South Carolina Aquarium, our local turtle team, support for a variety of different things with the Isle of Palms Exchange Club, the Isle of Palms Run, the Fort Moultrie Foundation. He chairs our Americanism Committee and has supported Veterans Group, has worked with setting up a Memorial Day luncheon for the VA and the VA staff. The South Carolina Historical Society board he sits on. He's worked with the various groups in the community that work to prevent child abuse. And I think he is meritorious of your consideration for this recognition. We would like it to be a surprise. I don't expect he's monitoring your meeting. I've not mentioned his name, and that's the reason, if you're wondering. But I think you've got all the details from me and perhaps with the assistance of your outstanding administrator. I thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions now or when you take it up on your agenda. Thank you.
Morning, my name is Sarah Vega and my address is 104 Sparrow Drive. I'm here to request that you table your discussion related to agenda item 5C until January of 2023. Council just acted last week to test drive the workshop format for handling city business, and the timeframe for this trial, as you already know, runs through December 2022. This is a fundamental shift in the way that we are governed and the way that citizens interact with that governing process. And one fundamental change at a time is more than enough. I request that you allow the workshop trial to please play out first before you even discuss reducing the size of council through a referendum. These two elements of government are inextricably connected. As voters, it's really important for us to know how we will be governed moving forward before we can make a truly informed decision about how many people we would like to govern us. If you do insist on moving forward with your discussion today, I hope that you will consider answering these questions in the name of transparency. What problem are you trying to solve by reducing the size of council? Who decided that the size of our council was a problem that needed to be addressed? Is it council members, voters that have spoken with you, city staff, or some combination? Why is reducing the size of council from 9 to 7 a solution that you feel best serves the public interest? These are really critical questions because creating policy is about identifying a problem and coming up with a solution that does the greatest good for the greatest number of people. The challenge lies in the fact that not everyone defines the problem in the same way, or even perceives there to be a problem at all. My problems on Sparrow Drive are not the same as those experienced by citizens who live on Ocean Boulevard, in Wild Dunes, or on the avenues around the Recreation Center. But each of those problems matters. And that's why having 9 voices on council serves Isle of Palms so well. More voices equals greater diversity of thought and lived experiences. It's more chances for every citizen to have their concerns heard and elevated through you, their elected representatives. To consider reducing the size of our council certainly seems a bit backwards to me. It seems like a solution that's looking for a problem. And when that happens in government, the outcome tends to serve a small group of people and their individual interests. I hope you'll agree that's certainly not what's in the best interest of Isle of Palms. Thank you for your time.
Right. All right. There are no old business items. Under new business, 5A, the consideration of applicants for vacancies in the Accommodation Tax Advisory Committee and Planning Commission. So I'll explain the process and what we're doing here. We have 4 open candidates on the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee. By statute, we have to fill those in certain ways. There has to be the open positions. There's 2 from lodging, there's 1 from the arts, and there's 1 at-large member. So we have to match, and we have 13 candidates. Very impressive candidates, I might add, that we'll have to sift through. And the plan is for us to go into the executive session at the end of the meeting and try to match those candidates up to those open positions and come out with 2 or 3 per open positions, of which we will schedule another meeting later this month to bring them in for interviews and then make recommendations to council. We also have an open planning commission vacancy, of which we have 4 candidates for. We'll do the same type of process there. We'll limit down to 2 candidates and then bring those in again at the special personnel committee meeting later this month for a recommendation to council in May. Any comments or questions on that? All right. Item 5B, consideration of nomination for the Spirit of the Island Award. So we have a recommendation that Mr. Keyhorn has already spoken about. It's in the packet. You want us not to keep this name. So it's, yeah, so you've read it. Is there any questions or comments on the nomination?
We're gonna say what Mr. Thompson, I think, is uniquely experienced, knowledgeable, charitable, generous. I think he would be a good candidate for this particular award that's been set up recently. I would wholeheartedly support the nomination.
Any comments or questions?
I don't know the person, but the resume is impressive and the endorsement equally so.
So Desiree, what is the process that we make a recommendation to move to council in the May meeting? Is that what it was? I forgot. We just did this. I already forgot the process.
Yes, this is a new award that was created. I think it was an initiative by Councilmember Ward. The Personnel Committee reviewed it, created guidelines, and the process by which people can make nominations for the award. So this will be the first award, y'all, the first nomination you all will consider for this award. And the process that was established at the time was for the Personnel Committee to deliberate, make a recommendation, and ultimately it's brought up to council for a full vote.
All right, and then assuming the council would pass this, then they're presented with the award at a council meeting. Is that what we do?
That's how we have done with the Signal 30 award. I believe that the Exchange Club has an event planned for later this month where either the mayor or the chair personnel, somebody on council can can present the award. There's a little bit of flexibility there, depending on, I guess, if there's a special celebration for this gentleman, it could be presented there.
I assume Mr. Thompson, I don't know, Jim, but I assume he lives on the island. There's not an address here, so he does live on. Okay,
So we're proposing an award for Santa.
for who?
Santa, is that right?
No, this is
No.
not saying.
No,
This
this
is
is,
not?
no,
Okay.
Jim Thompson. Yeah.
Okay, somebody else. Okay, sorry.
So is there a motion?
I would like to move to award Mr. Thompson the Spirit of the Island Award.
A second?
Any other comments or discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The next item, and I will mention that this is old business, it's not new business, is discussion consideration of reducing the size of council from 9 to 7 members by referendum in November 2022 general election. This is a topic that came up last year, and Desiree, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it was the previous council that came up and was the first, I think there was a first reading of this that passed to take it to referendum, and then there's a second reading that failed.
No, so this was also brought up by the previous personnel committee. They deliberated for a few months and the committee made a recommendation to city council to take on the issue. City council at a meeting did vote to have a referendum to reduce the size of council, but then the next step would be to approve that in via an ordinance that would require 2 readings. When the ordinance was then presented for first reading, that ordinance failed. And
The chronology of that was April and May of last year.
yes, April and May, I believe that's when the personnel committee discussed it. I know that the ordinance was introduced to council for first reading in July, and that's when it failed at first reading. So I shared with you all the packets of the personnel committee from last year, so you could familiarize with the discussion that the committee had at the time. Also shared with you all the ordinance that they requested to be drafted and presented to council. That's included. I sent that to you via email. That's on the website as well, part of the packet. The question was asked, is it required to have a referendum? There is a requirement, section 51530 of state law requires that any change of form of government or changing the number of council members is done by referendum. The referendum could be initiated by an action of council, which would be the ordinance, or initiated by a petition from the community.
So this was asked, we were asked to put this on the agenda to bring this up again. And I think that the timing was to try to meet the November election, that we have to have 2 readings and pass this and get this on the election or to the Charleston County Election Committee by the August in order for it to be on the ballot. So that's why it's on the agenda. I do know that this is a topic that there's probably a lot of discussion in the community on. I know as I was running for office, this came up repeatedly through the process. There's a lot of people, that were in favor of this, questioning, why we have so many council members. It seems unwieldy to the number that we have relative to the size of the community. And then there's others that said, that felt like, hey, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So there's different viewpoints on this. I'm curious. I think we should have discussion on it and see where we end up. I do think that, it is, again, a recommendation to council. And if council approves this, it is taking it to the people. So ultimately, the people, the citizens of the community are the ones who would decide if they felt it was important. And I think there is a lot of time between now and November to make sure that all the facts are out there, all the benefits of this, all the concerns of this are addressed with the community, and ultimately they would be the ones to decide in the referendum. So I'll open up to comments.
Well, I too have considered this, changing the number from 9 to 7. In other communities where I've made presentations and work, 7 is a good number. 9 is pretty large. 5 is too small in my experience. So 7 seems to be the sweet spot. We are a small community, and to find qualified people willing to make the commitment is difficult to find. 9, 7 seems to be a better number for us in that area too, in terms of not having to go too deep into our pool. I do have a question about the timing, though. I would like it to go to referendum to see what the community feels about this, but I feel like November is before we have information about how our workshop approach is going to, whether that will be effective or not. If we go to workshops, then we definitely, 7 would be a very workable number, because we wouldn't have all of these extra committees and meetings to sit on, which with 9 spreads it out a little bit more. So I sort of see the sequence is that we do the workshop test till December, see how that works. And then if we still want to consider reducing the size of council, we do that next. That's it.
I'd like to reiterate, during my recent campaign, it was a very prominent topic amongst the residents that I met with at all of my meet and greets and within the community. Very different opinions on whether to reduce or not reduce. I'm a huge supporter about the referendum. I think we can parallel process this as we do the workshops. We're going to know how the workshops are doing long before November. I also look at the November election as a midterm, where we're going to have probably the highest representation from the residents to be able to weigh in on such an issue. And with 6 months of runway, I think it's on us and other members of the community to ensure that everybody understands all of the potential impacts and how they feel about that, so that when they do go to the ballot box, they're highly informed. I think another piece of information that would be of value to their residents are benchmarking. I think if we look at the communities within South Carolina or even outside South Carolina, we're going to find that we are a bit of an anomaly as far as our representation based on the population of the island. That doesn't mean it's necessarily right or wrong, but I think that benchmarking and understanding how other communities are working with 7, 9, 5, I think is very important. And to reiterate what Jan said, I think that what you find in many cases, once you start expanding a team from 7 to 9, the decision process and the cycles are become a little bit more cumbersome. So what I believe personally doesn't really matter, but I think it's good that we put this out to the public.
Okay. Can we talk about the previous ordinance? There was a phased-in approach to this. And I believe the way it worked, and Desiree, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was a staggered approach to it, where the next election cycle, so this would be in 23, would be, there'd be 4 council members would run, but the council member that was elected with the lowest vote total would only be a 2-year term.
Yes, so that is what the Personnel Committee last year ultimately decided on the approach. They evaluated other options and felt like this would be gradual and would maintain the staggered terms that we currently, council currently has.
So if I follow through that, then the following to 2025, it'd again be 4 with the lowest vote total having a 2-year term. So effectively, this wouldn't take effect until 2027, where you actually have a council of 6 members plus a mayor. Is that the way I'm seeing this?
Yes, that's correct. That's how it was drafted.
Yeah. So there's a very long phased in approach to this as well.
I have a question about that. I was confused. Why would we go to the 2-year terms in between, what was the logic with that? But why don't we just, in the next election, have one fewer slot open for council?
That's an option. That's really up to you all. I was just showing you what the personnel committee looked at last year, and they had a lot of discussion and pros and cons. And this was just the option that they felt comfortable with. You all can,
I was going to ask, is it safe to say that if this were to proceed or approved, that there are multiple options on how to?
yeah, that's certainly something that the council can discuss what the best option or whatever option you all feel more comfortable with. When it comes to, just want to make very clear, when it comes to referendum activity and the city staff, the city cannot assume a position on any of the two options. All we can do is facilitate, provide information for you all, but there are state ethic laws that regulate that. So I just want to make it very clear. I know that oftentimes folks ask, well, what's staff's recommendation? When it comes to matters like this, they're policy driven. That should be directly a council conversation.
And I also will note that the previous ordinance recommendation was also a consideration of this and nothing binding by the referendum, which also would seem senseless to me, because I assume under that, council would have to come back, citizens would vote, council would come back and deliberate on whether to do it or not again. I mean, I think if we take it to the people decide that, yes, this is what's done, or no, it's not, it should be binding either way.
I would support that, John. I think that if we go to a referendum, we should make the language binding.
So can we talk about the timing again? There could be some things we need to work out, but I don't, before we take this to council, but I don't want to miss any kind of a deadline. Can you go over the timeline that's required by the county in order to get this on the ballot for November?
Sure. So in order to have a referendum in November for the general election, Charleston County would require having the referendum question by mid-August. So working backwards from there, because the referendum question would have to be approved by council via ordinance, you need two ordinances. So if you keep the regular schedule of council, you could have second reading in July, first reading in June, to meet that August deadline.
So we don't need to bring this to necessarily to council in May.
No.
I,
You could bring it to council and see whether the rest of the body is agreeable in moving in this direction before you spend more time drafting or changing the question. It'll be part of your report to council later this month, whether you bring it as part of an action item or not. But something like this, you may want to just see where everybody else is. Sooner the better.
I agree. I think my recommendation is bring this to council as a discussion item on the May council meeting. And then depending on that interest, we bring it back to find what the language is in the personnel committee and bring it to as a first reading in June.
That would fit the timeline.
I think that's fine. I just, with the cycles, if we lose 1 month, we're going to miss the, that would be my only concern. I think that having this issue or this topic, it's been in the community now for several years. Personally, I'd like to just continue to, I think that all of the council members are pretty well versed on the topic as of now. To wait until June, I'm not sure what that gets us beyond.
Well,
But I'm open for, if we think we can make the deadline and do it this way, I can support that.
yeah, my recommendation is not wait until June. Bring it to council in May for a discussion item to make sure that council discusses first their agreement to do this. And second, to decide whether it's going to be a binding referendum or not, and what the cycle, the phase-in cycle is, so that we can get some clarity amongst council that if they are in agreement, what their agreement to, so we can come back and finalize it in the June personnel committee meeting to have a draft of the ordinance to take to them in June.
Makes sense.
And I don't think we need a motion to do that, right?
No, and you can just bring it up as part of your, right,
We'll
Nicole?
just add it to the council meeting.
It'll be part of your report. We can list it on the council agenda just so that, you know, just for transparency, for the community and the public to know that there's going to be some specific discussion on this topic. But it's not necessary for you all to make a motion.
I have one question, John, and that is, do we want to show them the draft ordinance that was developed and say that we want to tweak this a bit? Because I think if I were not on this committee, and we're seeing this proposal for the first time in May and not really seeing the ordinance, the draft ordinance we're talking about until June, I would be reluctant to vote on something that quickly.
Yeah, I think we'll have this as an attachment into the council packet, and we'll be able to talk about the changes that we're
Yes.
recommending.
Okay, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's pretty quick. All right,
Come to the comment. All right. Then I guess we're miscellaneous business. Should we talk about a meeting date right now before we go into executive session?
Yes.
It seems there's some vacations planned here by both Scott and Jan. So council meeting's on the 31st, right?
24th.
Is it the 24th or the last Tuesday?
It's a fourth Tuesday. We have an extra week that day, that month.
Okay, that's the problem. Unless,
are you going?
I'm gone to the 21st, but like I said, I can either call in. I could remote this.
I'll be back. So.
Are you all trying to schedule a special meeting to
Yes.
potentially interview the candidates? Okay.
so if we did it the morning of the 24th, is that not enough time to get it to council? Because we have to have it 24 hours before.
That's
And we-
correct.
And we couldn't even do it on the 23rd.
I think we could.
You could do it on the morning of the 23rd. And it would, if y'all come out with a recommendation, that could be added to the agenda 24 hours before the meeting on the 24th.
Does that work for you?
And you can't do it on next Tuesday, right? Somebody's going on the 10th. You're here, but you're gone, right? On the
I
10th.
may be back by the time. I don't know. But then that fishes it all with you.
No, the 10th of May.
Yes. Yeah, I'm gone from the 7th to the
Yeah.
21st.
I guess we're gonna have to try to do it on the 23rd.
You could do it on the 23rd. If not, if you would have a quorum.
Yeah,
If,
but how, it'd be very difficult to do interviews remotely, right, for him?
no, not necessarily. We can do it Zoom. Or the two of you as a quorum could interview the candidates.
I don't think.
This would be all three of us for these interviews.
But the 23rd in the morning should be enough
Let's-
time.
Let's try the 23rd.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make it work. If I can't, I'll let everybody know. We'll have to try to do something.
Okay, and
So 23rd at
10 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the regular meeting will stay on the 7th of June. Is that,
Yes.
okay,
The regular meeting will be
Mhm.
7th of June. 9 a.m.
okay.
All right. So in accordance with South Carolina Code Section 30-4-78, to discuss personnel matters and applications for the ATAX committee and the planning commission to go into executive session.
so move.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.